Greetings everybody, my name is Tommy and welcome to my channel and welcome to Monopoly Week. Now I work a regular 9 to 5 job and my employer at this job was doing a contest regarding Monopoly. They put the board game in the back so we can get ourselves educated and hyped up about the contest, and it did carry a lot of the usual corporate BS that you can kind of come to expect from this type of thing. That said, being bored, I did take the time to take a look at the new board and kind of find out what has changed since I was a kid. Now, I do own a few Monopoly video games that I collected over the years because I do love that game, so I decided with the contest winding down to go back and take a look at those games and see how they stack up and which is the best and which is the worst. And no, it's not the one you're thinking about as being hands down the worst, nor is it the one that you think would probably be the easiest and best to understand being the best. Trust me about that. Anyways, before we really get into the games, first off, let's start talking about what started the board game and what the board game is about. For those kids who never took economics in school, because I don't think they even teach that stuff in school anymore, just by judging by some of the stupid stuff I see youngins post on social media. Anyways, if you wonder what a monopoly is, it's pretty much the center of all economics and political debates. Basically, it means that all the resources for a certain area of the economy is controlled by one person or company. This is bad because without competition, prices can be increased to the excess, quality can be lowered, and for the people who are in that workforce sector, their pay can become peanuts because, hey, where else are you going to work? Now, progressives and socialists will argue the best way to keep a private monopoly from forming is to have government come in, take over, and make it a government monopoly because a government monopoly would not run on profit. More libertarian capitalist people like myself would argue that without profit, though, you do not get a very efficient setup, and that in a private sector, that as long as the company did not control all assets for the making of that good, eventually competition would have to spring up when people would notice that there is profit and that there was that niche to be filled. Usually when it comes to these type of things, the truth is always in the middle and varies from situation to situation. Alright, the rules of the game, and it's hard to understand the rules. A lot of people don't play by the rules. They are kind of complicated, but once you understand them, the game's pretty fun. But basically, you start off the game with $1,500 if you play it by the regular traditional way, and the idea, though, is to bankrupt the other players. This is important to remember because a lot of people make the mistake that to win the game, it's about having the most money, and it's not. It's about taking the most risk, just like a real business should. You should not keep that money locked up in liquid assets, but rather have it in property and in houses so you can bankrupt your opponents. I guess I should explain the basic idea. You roll the dice. If you land on a property, you have two options, either buy or auction it off to one of the other players, and you can still participate in the auction if you do decide to auction it off. However, most of the time you're just safer just buying that property. When someone lands on a property that you own, they have to pay you rent. Whenever you have all of a color group, then you can purchase houses and hotels, making the rent go up. Properties at the beginning of the board are cheap to buy and cheap to buy houses and hotels for, but they offer the least amount of rent, with the lowest one being a measly $250 if you own a hotel there. However, properties at the end of the board are ridiculously expensive to buy and really expensive to buy houses and hotels for. But if you succeed in doing this, the rent can be astronomical. Landing on Boardwalk with a hotel on it will bankrupt most people right away. The trick of this game when it comes to money is not to have a huge stash, but rather to have enough money to make sure you can pay off other players' rents, plus any other obstacles that might occur, like landing on income tax or having a really bad luck with a chance card, without having to mortgage properties or sell houses. Like I said, real business have to deal with this kind of complex strategy about investing in new things to keep the business going and up to date, whilst keeping enough in the good old safe to handle anything in case of an emergency. If you don't watch your balances, your huge empire can collapse very easily. Also, the chances of you landing on a color group before any of your opponents do is slim, so therefore you're going to need to trade and buy from your opponents and strike deals in order to create these monopolies that you will need in order to buy and build houses and hotels. Do you risk giving your opponent a complete color group so you can build houses and hotels on another one? And if so, can you get a color group that you can do the same faster than your opponent? And more importantly, will your luck be better than his? It takes some shrewd tactics of thinking in order to be able to convince people of these trades. My strategy, though, is always to get 2 or 3 color groups in the first half of the board and then maybe one on the second half. The first half of the board won't bankrupt players if they land on a hotel there, but it will give you enough cash flow to start building on properties that will. You have to hurry, though, because if an opponent starts building properties on those more expensive boards before you can get it up and running, I usually lose. But if I can get those properties up and running and starting financing bigger stuff, I usually win. It takes time, it takes patience, and the game takes a while. Alright, this game does have a few problems with it, and it goes across all versions because it's a problem with the board game, and that is, first off, there is a little bit of luck that comes into this. I have had games where I've had 3 or 4 complete color groups with hotels on them, and I've watched as the computer danced around them and not landed on them, while I kept on landing on that one color group he did have with hotels and eventually go bankrupt in a turn or two. That can be frustrating, but it is a matter of luck. And for the most part, I don't think these games really cheat. There is an algorithm to the dice that sometimes benefits the computer, but it's far from what I would call cheating, with the exception of one game, and I'll get to that when I do a review of that piece of crap game. But we'll save that towards the end of the week. Second, though, in a lot of games, once a person gets into the lead, it's hard for the others to catch up. There is that balancing issue. But, like in real life, the more money and assets you have, the easier it is to gain money and make more assets. Still, if you're the one running behind, it just sucks. And as far as balancing, there is only one card that can really rebalance the game if someone gets too far ahead, and that is the dreaded chance card that has you doing street repair bills and paying a bundle for each house and hotel you own. But if you don't get that, then you don't have to worry about ever having to sell off a lot of your property in order to pay for it. Still, the chances of getting that card are slim to none. And of course, the main problem with this game is it takes forever. Even against a computer in a video game where I don't have to count the money, it still takes 2 to 2.5 hours to complete one game on easy. Monopoly is a game that takes a commitment to see through to the end. Anyways, let's start talking about a few of the changes that this game has gone through since I was a kid. And for the most part, I do like the changes. Alright, first let's start with the small cosmetic changes. The beginning properties have been changed to a brown color. They used to be a purple color, which was very similar to another property group worth way more money that's just down the board. Also, the income tax is now just $200, which I like because no one uses that 10% anyways. One of the more confusing changes, I don't quite understand the need to change it, is the luxury tax is now $100 instead of $75. I don't know why they increased the price by $25. Maybe just to keep everything even, but then you do have the ones and you do have the $5 bills still in the game, I do believe. Anyways, one of the biggest changes that I do enjoy is completely optional, and that is modern day packages and modern day video games also have this option. Come package in with something called the speed die. With the speed die, games can be done in under an hour. And I know what you're thinking, a Monopoly game that only lasts an hour or two and doesn't run from one presidential election to the other is kind of blasphemous, but yeah, the speed dice does speed things up, provided you do have people who are willing to trade and take risks. If you're dealing with stubborn people, then yeah, the game's going to drag on regardless. But anyways, Why it makes the game go super fast is not only do you have that extra die with the extra number on it, but you also have Mr. Monopoly on one of the die faces. What does he do? Well, if you follow the rules of the game, when it comes to the first two dice, whatever property you land on, whatever space you land on, as long as it's not go to jail, you will follow whatever rules. If you have to pay rent, you pay rent. If you have to buy property, you buy property. Then afterwards, you go to the next available property that is for sale at the start of the game. However, once all the property gets snatched up, you want to avoid rolling Mr. Monopoly like a plague, because he's now going to send you to the next property that you have to pay rent for. And if that property has a hotel and is on the latter side of the game board, you're screwed. But it is called the speed die for one reason. It makes the games go faster, so it really does go faster with everyone landing on spaces that have hotels on them and everybody paying rent. So it does do its job really, really well. And it's fun and it mixes up the strategy. And the best part of it all is it's completely optional. You can always just take that die out if you don't want to use it. So what is it about the newer versions that I myself don't like? Well, it's got to do with the chance and community cards completely sucking. Don't get me wrong, they still do the same thing. It's just the artwork on them sucks. And if you're going, well, I just hate the way the new CGI characters look, I want to say no. My problem with them is it's generic. It's usually just Mr. Monopoly striking a pose. The old community cards and chance cards had some humor, they had some charm to them, they showed different settings that would have happened in the 1920s, and kind of had a little bit of parody going on. Here it's just like I said, a CGI character doing a generic pose, and it just doesn't look well. It looks cheap, and it's just not really fun. The old chance and community chess cards kind of had a little bit of fun just to see what pose he'd be striking and what they would look like. Here, like I said, generic and completely forgettable. I should also mention they took out a few of my favorite tokens. The horse and rider token, which was one of my favorite tokens that I picked when I was a kid, is no longer there. They did throw in a cat token. I prefer a horse and rider myself, but I guess he wasn't considered popular anymore, so they decided to take him out and put in a figurine people voted in. Oh well. Basically, when it comes to the newer versions of the game, I enjoy most of the improvements, and I love the optional speed die they threw in. Both the video games and real board games are improved because of this. And while I do enjoy the game and love playing it since I was a kid, it's not perfect. All the criticisms that this game gets, like it's too long and some of the other imbalances, are certainly true. And that's because it's trying to emulate business as well as make a political argument as well. And that does kind of bog down the gameplay. But still, it's pretty fun and it's definitely worth checking out. And I want to be taking a look at some of the video games I have in my collection and tell you about them. We will start off with the oldest one I got, which is the NES version. And if you're going, well, that's going to be the worst, no. And if you think I'm going to dog on the new games for being bad because of some of the changes I complained about, no, it's actually kind of a mix. Some of the older games are really good, and one of the newer games is complete crap. But I'll get into that once I do the reviews for it. So welcome to Monopoly Week. If you have any comments, feel free to leave them down below, and I would love for you to click on that subscribe button and join my community. I'll be doing these videos this week. I also do other reviews, and I'm signing out, and I'm hoping to see you guys soon. See you later.